Seems like. I don't know.
No, he still is.
I don't know if the theology is anything the same, but so it's neat. You could stop and visit there, and the museum is all dedicated to religious artifacts. The wealthy people that built the cathedral, built their house and the other house, and Bryn Athyn is also a university, a college right across the street. They're all part of that, and theoretically, you don't have to be a member of the Swedenborgian Church to go to the Bryn Athyn College, but you have to attend all the services, etc. If you're going there. So, I don't know if you're interested in that sort of thing, but
Is that an accredited?
pardon?
Accredited?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Liberal
Very
arts?
exclusive liberal arts college. But in any case, the wealthy people, you've got artifacts from all over Egypt. Egypt seemed to be their favorite, but they had religious artifacts from all over. And they're all in that the smaller house was the museum. So you could go in there and see all the Egyptian artifacts, etc. Okay, so yes, William James's older brother was Henry. So if you're a fan of Henry James, how many of you have ever read a Henry James novel? Exactly, no one. Turn of the Screw, Washington Square, they're out there, and they're huge tomes.
You read them?
I've read
Did they
some.
make a movie?
Turn of the Screw. They made a movie out of Turn of the Screw. It's a horror movie about the woman that's hired to be the nanny for the children.
The Hand That Rocks the Cradle?
Pardon?
It's not The Hand That Rocks the Cradle.
No, it was called The Turn of the Screw, and it's a haunted house, and the previous nanny was murdered. Is the ghost. So it's kind of a scary. No, a lot of people really loved him. He was a very popular writer. In fact, when I was at the Defense Language Institute and I asked my one teacher, Gaspa Baja Furman, what was her favorite English book, she looked at me and she said, Henry James, her favorite author, American author, Henry James. And I thought, how Russian, because if you're bored reading Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, read James. They're so similar. It's the same kind of in-depth analysis of individual characters, etc. Okay, but they went to private schools all over the place, the James kids, because the father was an eccentric, not only Swedenborgian, but also rich, and they wanted the best for their kids, so they would research and find out where the best schools were in France. They take their kids there. After a month or two, they weren't convinced it was the best school, so they take their kids out and they go to another one, and then another one, and then another one. James wanted to grow up to be an artist, but he ended up, of course, studying psychology and philosophy, and went to the scientific school at Harvard, where he got his degree in 1869. Now notice the Civil War ended in 65, so he wasn't in the war. None of the James sons were in the war, I'm pretty sure. And that was because they were just too young to have been in that. But when he did graduate, I think I mentioned that one of the things that they like to do is go on an expedition in Brazil. And another individual that did this when he graduated from Harvard was Teddy Roosevelt. It was about the same time period. Remember, in fact, James was very upset with the war against Spain, and the way things went there with Grover Cleveland and the annexation of Hawaii and the sinking of the Maine in Manila. in the Philippines. The ship was like the authorities said, park your ship here. So they did, and then that night it was attacked and destroyed. So it seemed like the authorities had something to do with it, and that was Spanish at the time. So we ended up at war with Spain, etc. And James was against the whole thing, a peacenik basically. And Teddy Roosevelt, who wasn't in government yet, but was of course the leader of the Rough Riders who attacked San Juan Hill in Cuba as part of the war, right? Teddy got his own cavalry together, friends and others, and basically paid for it and took them down there and attacked San Juan Hill. Teddy Roosevelt became president, right? And he's the one with speak softly and carry a big stick. Whack. Monroe Doctrine, etc. Part of it was Venezuela. Venezuela at one point was in a dispute with the British colony that's part of the border of Venezuela, British Guiana, I think. And there was a fight between Britain and Venezuela over it. And Grover Cleveland came in and said, nope, nobody else except America gets to help this, settle disputes in the, no British. And if the British insist, we'll go to war against Britain. And it was, what? No way. Ridiculous. In any case, you can see James's point of view, but of course, there you go. But Teddy Roosevelt and he both studied with this biology teacher at Harvard, Louis Agassiz. And Louis Agassiz is from Switzerland. He's anti-Darwin. Doesn't believe in evolution. Believes in the Bible, and this is how old it is. And one of the specific things he was against was the idea that there was an ice age, and that the ice age was like only in certain areas. He argued that if God had made an ice age, he would have had the entire world in the ice age, not just like the glaciated areas that we've identified still better today, etc. And so he took his students on trips to Brazil, to the Amazon, to study whether or not the glaciers were there as well, to prove that if there was an ice age, it hit Brazil as well as these other places. And he actually thought he proved it, but James, who was one of the students with him, was like, I don't think so. But Agassiz did have fans. He was very popular. And in fact, if you go to Harvard, the Natural History Museum at Harvard is named in his honor. It's the Louis Agassiz building, whatever. Emerson Hall, by the way, is the philosophy department at Harvard. So notice Emerson. I put him up there. And so Agassiz is pretty interesting. He was a very big man, by the way, and when he died, they had to build an especially large coffin for him. So he's interesting.
Ethicology, is that fish?
Pardon?
Ethicology, see the word there, something I also became famous for?
Ecology?
It was
Ichthyology, study of fish. Yeah, so if we go to Harvard.
They must have got those gills right then, right?
I'm pretty sure. I haven't searched for this before. Yeah, that's what I want. And so here's the Here's the museum. I guess there's all kinds of news about it. I mean, you know, so yeah, you could go visit. And they've got all kinds of things. It's their Harvard Natural History Museum. So, okay. Let me mention Josiah Royce since that came up. Josiah Royce was the first completely homegrown American philosopher. Santayana is the second. Actually, Santayana got his PhD in Europe as well. But Royce did all his studying in the United States at Stanford and then at Harvard. He was a student of James and then became a colleague. And in fact, they lived next to one another. In Cambridge. They had their houses right next to one another, and they walked to school together and came back home afterwards, which all the historians are pissed off about because that meant that they didn't write letters to one another, so we don't have any record of their arguments with one another. And they must have been real doozies of arguments because they're really quite different. So, for example, when we're this is Groke. I asked Groke to do this comparison for me yesterday, and it agrees with me completely.
We're
It's
back to that, huh?
funny how that works.
That's not, it's not skewed, not at all.
So we've got, their key work, the varieties of religious experience, which, I mean, when we timed these, they were both Josiah Royce and William James were at different years the invited guest speaker at Edinburgh for the lecture there on religion, philosophy and religion, science and religion, really. The Gifford lectures, by the way, they still have those every year. Charles Taylor, for example, was the Gifford lecturer for 1 year. Daniel Dennett was a lecturer for another year. So quite a few folks get to do that. One person a year, but still. Bruno Latour was the lecturer also before he died. So those are all three people on my list. But the varieties of the religious experience, the significant thing about that is James did a lot of research on the religious experience and also paranormal experiences and mental illness. And by the way, remember that Kay Redfield Jamison in her book Touched by Fire considers James to be very similar to Søren Kierkegaard as one of these bipolar individuals. That part of the illnesses that they experience and the manias that they experience are exact experiences of someone who's bipolar, right? But in the varieties of the religious experience, which he gave as the Edinburgh lecture, the Gifford lecture, is on religion and science, argues from a psychological point of view what the value of religion is. It doesn't get into theology, doesn't argue this religion is right or this religion is wrong. By the way, notice that Josiah Royce will argue that. Will argue that if you scientifically study religion, you'll discover which religion is the best. Christianity, turns out. By the way, if you look at how Christianity does impact societies, when we had the Arab, what the heck was it called? Or they had started off with the man in Tunisia burning himself, and it started the Arab Spring. That's what it was called, the Arab Spring. And you ended up with the revolution in Tunisia, which took that one actually took, and that religion, that society is still a democracy now, but it also affected other societies across, the North Africa region, including Egypt. And Mubarak was, they had a student revolt against Mubarak. We lived through that. That was, relatively recent. I had one friend who was working for the radio there and was looking at her hotel at Tahrir Square where all of that stuff happened. And they overthrew Mubarak, but then they had a free and open election, and they ended up voting for the Muslim Brotherhood, which was like, oh no, that's not what we want. So then that was overthrown, and of course now we have the Egyptian military in charge again.
You mean the Americans?
Well, they're Egyptian.
Okay.